and he wasn't. And he had to deal with this dichotomy in his own heart. Let me close because I want you to see the father's reply. Let me just read it again for context, beginning with verse 28. But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I have never transgressed your commandment at any time, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who had devoured your livelihood, with his daddy, he could give it to the boy, let him throw it away he wanted to. With harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. And look at the father's response. He says to him, son, this is a loving father. This is a public conversation. The father was in the party. The boy was outside with the servants. The father came outside. So you know some of the people came outside and they eavesdropped on this conversation. So the loving father now has allowed the older son to disrespect him publicly, to speak to him in a way that was not fitting and that was not appropriate. And rather than calling for him to be beaten or whipped or scourged or whatever, the loving father looks at his wayward, rebellious, self-righteous, prideful oldest son, and he says to him with compassion, son, you're my son. And all these years you done been with me. And everything that I had, you had access to. I've never held anything back from you. You had access to everything. You had the MasterCard, the Diners, the American Express, the J.C. Penney, the Sears Roebuck. You even had the Value City card before they closed. You had access to all of it, son. I never held anything back from you. But listen what the father says. He says, it was right. It was just. I couldn't help myself. I could not contain myself. It was right. It was appropriate for me. We had to make a merry party. We had to have a big gala. We had to rejoice. We had to be glad because this was your brother. And now Jesus is hammering the point. And he's hammering the point to the religious leaders. He says, I can't help myself but to receive the sinners. I can't help myself to receive the publicans. These are your brothers and your sisters. And I can't help but to rejoice to see them coming from the far country, picking themselves up, and now embracing the truth. He said they was dead. Now they're alive. He was lost, and now he's found. And as I close, remember, I've told you before, it's not only what is in the Bible that's profound in terms of what Jesus says, but it's also what he doesn't say. If you look at this text closely, when he comes to the end of the parable, it's just like a good movie. He lets you finish it for yourself. He doesn't tell you whether or not the oldest boy went in or whether he stayed outside pouting. And you know why he didn't tell us? Because the conclusion, the ending, would be how the religious leaders responded. He now had them up close. He vicariously had brought them into the story. Now they were the oldest son. He was the father, begging them to come into the party. So he drops the story right there because their decision would be whether or not the oldest boy came in or whether he stayed out. And so it is with us. On this day, April the 19th, 2009, we find ourselves in this story somewhere. Sometimes we like the youngest boy. Sometimes we like the oldest son. But the question is, how do we respond? Do we keep holding on to anger and bitterness and resentment? Do we keep blaming our parents, our grandparents, our situation? Do we always find some reason from excusing ourselves from responsibility? Or we just pick ourselves up and say, look, I'm going into the party. I'm going to accept the Father's invitation to come into the party and rejoice and receive his forgiveness and receive his blessings and receive his benefit. and allow the Father to make me into being the Son that I so desire to be. Our God, he's a loving Father. He's unlike anybody that we could ever imagine. He's unpredictable because just when we think he's going to drop the hammer, if there's true repentance and remorse, he will kill the fatted calf. And just when you think you've got him figured out and we look at a situation or a circumstance and it appears to be pristine, pure, and righteous, but his piercing eyes can see beneath the surface and he knows what's really going on. As the Father in this text understood the turbulence in the heart of his oldest son. But what the loving Father does, he deals tenderly, gently,